talk about habits. And we're also going to talk about hobbies and, the relative value that you can get or the relative value of things based on others, I suppose, really, and maybe based on yourself and what is actually of value. So, um, and I guess, I'm going to try to derive some kind of philosophical ending talk about, purpose and meaning, but we'll see, because, sometimes that's a hard one to bridge from something like habits and hobbies, but not always. So, uh, first and foremost, we're going to, just talk a little bit about, habit forming in general and what kind of creates, good habits, what creates a series of down cycles that make it so habits are either broken or don't form, and what is the, a purpose of a habit in general, or maybe not even the purpose, but the cause, the reason for the habit, and why some habits are stronger or more easy to, what would I say, attain? Attain may be the right word. So, let's talk for a moment about habits. And first and foremost, we can look at, kind of the general understanding that we're presented with by, just the images that are first brought up when we search the word habit itself. So, the first things that you'll see are some of these ideas of, well, there's an interesting one with routine, reward, and what is the other portion of this here? A cue. It's almost right. But that's sounds like that's more related to, maybe some kind of social engineering, which is viable and important to talk about. But let's see here. Not much really going on, so let's talk about the idea of, what a habit is. And habits are usually a routine or a ritualistic thing that you're doing on a standardized basis. And usually those habits are very difficult to form, taking at least 30 days of consecutive habitual actions. And again, this habit may not be just a one time a day thing. It may be something that you do over the course, or it may be a hourly thing, like I habitually would like to drink, half a glass of water every hour. Well, once you start to, the first time you don't do that for that first hour after, that's that breaking of the habit cycle. And, if you continue to do that over the course of several days, it's usually only 3 days or so that it takes to break a habit. Then you will easily break it. And so let's talk about something a little less complex than multi-day, habits. Let's say something like you'd like to make a habit of always doing push-ups in the morning. It's a pretty obvious one. You're going to know when you're going to break the habit because it's the morning time. The morning time passes and you didn't do it. So you'll know when you break the habit. It's very easy to then get into the cycle of, if I do this every day for about 30 days, the likelihood I'm going to do it on the 31st day is actually, I don't know, almost 100% higher than it was on all of the previous 30 days, even though that was the time you were building the habit. Versus if you decide to, on the 60th day, stop doing it for a day, and you only don't do it for a day, you may actually continue to keep the habit. But if for whatever reason you say, the next day I'm not going to do it either, maybe you hurt your shoulder or whatever, even though you feel like you could do the push-ups, in the morning, but you're not going to, so you don't, and then the next day you don't do it again, it's very easy to have that habit then be broken, especially when it's that much more simple, once-a-day habit. Now, habits that are very, very easy to develop are ones that are reinforced by physical need. And, you can see that one or two of the things that they have here, show cigarettes. And here's another series here that's showing a series of different habits. Procrastination is not necessarily a habit. That's an interesting. And what is a comfort zone challenge? What a strange thing. So let's not trust this. These first two seem to make sense, though. Exercising and eating healthy. And maybe not even eating healthy, but eating not healthy in comparison to others, but finding out what your level of health is. And by your level of health, I mean your body will not respond the same to food as other people's bodies will. So you need to find out what it is that's going to make your body work best. I, for example, need large amounts of lactic acid, so I have to drink large amounts of milk. You probably won't be that way, nor will you have the same issues with needing a lot of mucus because of your asthma issues. You probably aren't that same issue. Or drying out, really. It's not really the asthma, but the drying out from breathing through my mouth too much, things like that, literally, and that's not. See, you might say, oh, well, is breathing through your mouth a habit? And you say, yeah, I guess it's a habit, but the problem is that my nose has always got a postnasal drip, so I can't really develop an easy form of breaking that particular habit because it would consume too much time, I suppose, to constantly try and keep myself so, highly hydrated that I could. Yeah, it's too much work versus something like exercise or eating healthy where you can say, okay, yeah, no, I can do those easily. Or I can drink plenty of water. And interestingly, they do have two other, in the bad section, they do have smoking and drinking, which are terrible habits, but they are very easy to habitualize due to the idea that they are physically addictive. And it's through that physical addiction motivator that you end up getting a much easier attenuation of a habit. You can much easier, create a bond with, a habit that is dependent upon a physical need. That's why somebody, even though they don't have the habit of doing something like heroin, if they do heroin, it's got such a high physical need dependency that they will easily develop the habit. And that's true to the extent that, people will be on prescription drugs and will develop a need for the opiates in such a massive way that heroin is something that they have to go to when they can't get their prescription. That would be and you can see how that habit is not even something that is reinforced through time, because it's usually not. And same with someone like a crackhead that will do crack and then need to do crack really badly again. That habit isn't reinforced through time. It's reinforced through a physical need, and not usually a psychological one. Usually it's a physical one that is overwhelming to the person who takes or uses the drug. We can compare that to something like alcohol. And you can see that alcohol is not going to pursue your body in that same extreme physical need until you've used it into an extreme extent. Now, maybe there's something to be said that heroin is a very strong drug compared to some of its, equivalents like morphine, which is 4 times less strong, and laudanum, which was sometimes like a 20th of morphine or something, or a 10th of morphine. So, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a sneeze this morning for some reason. So, yeah, I got animals that just, and cats, and they're all awful, for sneezing anyway. So it may be possible that the drugs that people are taking that are opiates are just already so strong or so much stronger than they should be, that's kind of what's happening for that heavy physical dependency in comparison to something like alcohol. Because probably someone who takes something like laudanum is more akin to alcohol. Excuse me. And only, it's pretty disgusting, I'm sure. Poor creature that I am. All right. So, something akin to laudanum maybe would have the same kind of effect that alcohol might have. It would have the smaller, physical dependency over time. And only after you've done it over a large period of time would you see some of these massive problems that you see in somebody that might be a heavy alcoholic. So, I mean, these are again talking about bad habits. Now, usually, most of the habits that a human being develops are always positive. Well, almost all. Excuse me. Um, that maybe is a little bit of an extreme notion. Um, but a lot of the habits that we tend to develop, okay, how about a large percentage of the habits are probably very good habits? We don't even know that we've developed them. Things like brushing our teeth, things like taking a shower, things like washing our clothes, things like washing our dishes, things like tidying our house, things like um, feeding ourselves on a constant basis. These are great habits that we don't even recognize that we've formed over time. Okay, well. Um, and likewise, some of these habits we will take for granted. Um, and you'll, break and lose habits that you've had for, long periods of time and not even notice that it occurs when it does occur. Um, but usually, when you've, habitualized things into your life, you can usually get them back fairly easily. It's kind of the riding the bike, syndrome. Um, um, so usually, if you have, uh, and this is even shown out with, it's an interesting, parallel to make, but usually if you've done anything that your body will, and your mind will be more likely to be able to understand and recreate that, sense again. Um, this is seen through, and this is the kind of strange parallel that I made in my mind, that when a person does a testosterone, stack, and they are doing some kind of, basically some kind of steroidal, throughout, time. And I haven't, done that, unfortunately. I just, I'm not, and I say unfortunately because what I'm about to say is that your body actually learns the high frequency, testosterone release. It learns how to do it. It learns what's happening with it. And when you in the future work out in very heavy ways, even without steroids, your body is more likely to be able to release and do that heavy testosterone form than if you had never done steroids. It's almost like it learns the pathways. And so there's something to be said about that in relation, I suppose, to the idea that habits can translate fairly easily after you've stopped doing them. You can very easily get back to them, especially when you've done them for a larger period of your life than you haven't done. Now, having said that, it's still very easy to break habits. Now, so let's talk about hobbies for a bit. It's funny because Hobby Lobby comes up. I remember Hobby Lobby was one of my first times really thinking about the idea of hobbies. And it was in these kind of strange, forms of like, you'd get these like battleships, and they still have them obviously, and you'd put together this, plastic ship with all of these little guns and all these little parts, and you're supposed to, paint the whole thing as well. Is a whole goddamn ordeal. And you say to yourself, okay, well, what is that for, and what's the value of it? Kind of like this hobby horsing person here with their, horse you can see there. That's pretty funny. Um, what is the value of something like that? And maybe it's only to yourself at that point, and maybe it's really the value is that you're learning how to maybe paint and maybe how to be a little bit more exact and how to do things in that kind of smaller way. But when we talk about hobbies that are actually relative and of some kind of value, um, I would say that a lot of Hobby Lobby here. This is crazy. Also, when you see the word hobby or you think of Hobby Lobby, for whatever reason, I at least will think of trains. They had all these goddamn trains there. Who the hell's buying all these trains? What a waste of money. I don't know. Maybe not. It's your hobby. See? So maybe that's when, again, we're talking about relative value. And I think when we talk about relative value that, you don't want to have trains be a big deal to you. Why? Because it doesn't have a relative value to almost anyone else besides maybe your children, but to you. And if you're alone and you plan on always being alone, then maybe you could say, okay, well, I'm going to spend my money on what I think is a relatively good value in this hobby. And hell, maybe you're right. Maybe. I don't agree, but that's because I want to spend my money on something I find more of value. So, talking about relative hobbies that actually make sense. We're going to say something like guitar. Guitar is a great relative hobby that makes sense. Even more relatively valuable would be something like piano. Piano will be able to help you translate into a lot of other instruments, including guitar. So, but again, the hobby, the thing that you're developing, is your interest in music. And if you can start with, a guitar, that's fine. That's a good, starting place. And if you need to start somewhere else, or if you prefer to start somewhere else, which would be a good idea when it comes to piano, then you most certainly should. What else is there that are really good hobbies? When you develop these starting, hobbies like the thing I was describing with the battleship and all of the different paints that you put on it. I might have to kick this rooster out. He's making too much fucking noise. Um, so when you have that, you're developing these small techniques and skills in your hands. And there's probably the same things that are important of why you should learn writing, why you should learn cursive, is you're developing these small techniques that if you do intend on ever using them for something like painting, for sculpting, for pottery, that you have, a little bit more of a sense of what's going on. Give me just a second here. Excuse me. All right, well, that was exciting. Always is. So, basically, I had just a rooster inside. He was crowing like, mad. So obviously I got him out. So basically, if, you start out with those lesser things and you start to develop them in a way that's of some kind of value, That is to say, you're starting to understand, the mixture of some of these colors, which is probably not going to happen on those miniature miniatures, or even on the building miniatures that are a little bit larger. Mostly because you're not going to usually get the kind of paints that can even mix. Um, when you're painting miniatures, or at least in my experience, a lot of the paints felt very glazy. I guess they were going on pewter. So, but since I've been painting in a longer span of time, I have gotten more of a developed ideal of how to mix colors, and how to make shading and proper lighting. And these things are very difficult and take time. And so again, these are hobbies that if you ever intend on being good at anything, you really, really need to start, because the habit of doing something over the course of a large period of time is much more valuable than the habit of trying to do it over a short period of time, very concentrated. When you paint in a large amount, maybe for a year or so, and then you stop, you still have all of these great skills that you've learned, and when you decide to start painting again, you'll have these skills available, and maybe you'll start to paint less, like you'll paint just for a week or so, maybe even a year. And what happens though is that you have these stronger developed skills, and over time you learn more and more and more. And that's true of any of these, what I'd say, the more relatively valuable hobbies. Now, we haven't even talked about truly relatively valuable hobbies, and that is to say, even if we go to things like value, but truly relatively valuable hobbies are things like, I guess, like the trades would be the easiest way to describe it. But learning things that are truly valuable when in the life that you live. And don't be so cloistered that you think that some of these things are things you don't need to learn. Someone else can do it, or it's too complicated, or you've made a system that's so complicated that it won't allow you to easily do it. I would say, and I'm talking about things like electrical, engineering, and I say engineering, electrical, just the hooking up of an electrical box and an outlet. Most people can't even understand that, and incredibly important that you start to develop the skills of building and maintaining a home, unless you intend on never living in a home and you plan on living out in the woods as a mongrel. I don't see how these people, and I mean by that almost everyone, lives their lives and has no idea how to deal with any of the things around them. They literally could not affect and change any of the systems which literally make their lives better every single day. They've grown so far detached that the idea of a water heater, the idea of a of a of a plumbing system in general, of the way exhaust, for the house, for the drainage, or the septic, works. It's so much simpler than anyone's ever been allowed to give credit for, and nobody knows it. And for what it's worth, is it so much simpler? Yes, it is for me, because I've had this habit of doing work inside of a house for at least 10 years, at least. maybe longer, but of understanding things about power, understanding things about how you build, understanding, always looking at the way that things are made and understanding why they're made that way and what's happening. Um, and I suppose that maybe it's a an awareness and a, what would you say, being accustomed to some of these things, you've actually seen them. Versus other people haven't literally seen some of the things that I'm talking about. They've never seen a. It's amazing to think that they wouldn't understand what they're looking at, but you know, most people have probably seen at least a septic or a sewer line going down in a large building. They see these large pipes all going, but they don't even recognize that they could, attach onto that something to make a new, bathroom or a new kitchen or sink or a new whatever it is that they need to have drained. That literally that thing is an active working thing and it can be used. That's past the mind of most people. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just the idiot that's always thought like that. Until I, grew some level of awareness. So, um, let's see here. Now, we've been talking about this for a while, even though this is not going to really be what I'm trying to reference. Maybe relevance is correct instead of relativity, because when you type in relativity, for whatever reason, it only comes up with a theory of relativity, and that's frankly not what we're talking about. We're talking about relevance. Relativance? That's probably not going to work. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and search only for relevance? Oh, no, search only for relativance. Yeah, the Federation of Relativance. There you go, nation states. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so relevance is not really being shown very okay. So not very, helpful in my my attempts to, make it more obvious what we're trying to talk about here. Let's see if Merriam-Webster relation to the matter at hand. I guess that's exactly what we're trying to go for there. And practical and especially social applicability. Yes, again, very close. The ability as of an information retrieval system to retrieve material that satisfies the needs of the user. Okay. Again, it's about the needs of the person and the actual value that it has in relation to that. And pertinence, yes, that's fine. So, with this, very basic, explanation, what we'd say is that when you try to develop a habit, make sure that it has some relevant meaning to your life. Likewise for hobbies. If it doesn't have a relevant meaning, if you don't intend on ever showing anybody your guitar skill or ever trying to play guitar in any way or even enjoy it yourself, you're just learning because you think it's a good idea, that would have no relevant meaning to anyone, including yourself. So you definitely should not be doing that as a thing. So, and when we talk about again, value to, excuse me, to yourself and others, I would say that you have a reason why people will scoff and look at you askance and think that the things that you say are stupid when they are relatively so far away from anything that they would understand, or you can't even make them understand them on any kind of relative sense. I mean, like, let's imagine you've got a housewife, and this housewife is got her young son, And her young son is, he's a normal kid, but, he likes, all of these mangas and all of these, animes. And he's trying to get his mom to watch it with him, and his mom can't get the relevance of any of it because maybe it's just not speaking to her on any level. And he can't even, and finally, maybe he would show her, a something that was, actually something that she would like. And, but it would have to have a relevant angle that made sense to her. Otherwise, it would just be insane. And I think that there's something to be said about that, basic idea that, when you are engaging or obsessing over something that other people can't find any kind of value in, then they are going to find you kind of, I don't know if obscene is right. It's more abhorrent. Like, you're going to be like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Versus, if you were to, and that there is something to be said that you should go ahead and live whatever kind of life you want and whatever kind of thought process and do these kind of goofy things or, like things that other people don't like. But you should also really like things that people do like. Like if your mother really enjoys, fresh greens or something, you just grow her a bunch of fresh greens and have them available and then just be like, here, and she'll really appreciate you for that. Or if, you know, yeah, I'm just trying to, try to make this relative so that it actually makes sense here. Like there's no when your hobbies or your habits have no relative meaning. It's again like the train thing. When I went into Hobby Lobby, I was always confused why there were so many trains and why they were so expensive. And it's because somebody is spending a bunch of money on this shit and it makes no sense. And it's got no relevance to anyone besides them. And that's why I'd never even seen one of them, all built up in person. Because, these people just, I don't know. Maybe they're very sociable and they show other people their trains and they're very happy to or something, but I've never even seen such a thing. And so I can't imagine why that would be a relevant hobby to have versus something like playing piano, where you could be walking through the park and there's a piano that they leave in the park because, that's how crazy, cities are. They just have random, and they're not great pianos, but they're usually, tuned. So, you go and you can literally strum out a nice, thing on the piano. It's that relevant ability to play something that other people will enjoy is available to you. And you can say that likewise for the train thing, that, this old man that's got these trains would be able to give it to his son. His son will love to have them, and yeah, blah, blah, blah. But, if the son ends up breaking one and then, dad's not around, because he's gone, and dad, I'm imagining, is uh, he goes and tries to buy this new train to replace and realizes it's $1,300. You're going to be like, well, what? Not realizing the relative value of that money in some other venue. Making that hobby both, very selfish and kind of on uh, not easy to translate versus something like the piano playing. Or, the hobby of, doing a bunch of push ups, making it so that you're stronger and you're able to help people with things that, require your ability to move and, lift things. These hobbies always, again, coming back to having relevance. Now, let's try to talk about value as a philosophical idea. We could read the Wikipedia. I don't really trust it, but we could. Um, Excuse me. Being a disgusting creature. I'm sorry about that. So, in ethics, value denotes the degree of importance of something or action with the aim of determining what action are best to do or what way is best to live. Yes, obviously. Okay, so in relation to hobbits and or hobbits, yeah, but hobbies and to habits, the value that you actually get from something is, again, it's relative to its relevance to other people. If you don't have any kind of relevance to other people, then the hobbies and the habits that you develop will either, drive people away or they'll bring them closer to you. Like, again, the ideal of uh, building a garden for your mother. That's a hobbit or a hobby that would be a very good thing. That gardening and then the habit of going out and tending it, would probably give you some kind of good senses. Versus, the habit of doing heroin all the time, around your mother, and then you literally are like completely strung out, and she can't fucking understand anything that you're saying, and you're nodding off against the wall or something. That's not going to do anyone any good. There's no value in it, and the relative ability for someone to relate to the thing is not going to be even slightly functional. You're not going to gain anything. No one's going to enjoy it, and so there is no value to that potential habit. Well, but see, let me rephrase that. Okay, let's say though that you are somehow a really successful guitarist, and you're like Jimi Hendrix, and you've been doing acid for so goddamn long that nothing gets you off, and so heroin's the only thing that inspires you anymore, and so then you go write some ridiculously insane thing like Purple Haze, and it was heroin inspired, and yeah, it's going to end up killing you because it is such a bad habit, but you used it for something good. That's the only time I've seen heroin be used in a valuable sense, but then it always kills them. So is it a good habit? No. Again, what's the habit versus the value? Is the value of writing something really prolific while they were on heroin as good as the value of not having the habit that makes them die? These are questions that you've got to ask yourself, I suppose, in real time, though it seems like the answer is pretty damn obvious. And so when you talk about, again, relative value in relation to something like a hobby, we'll say, you can say, okay, well, I'm playing basketball all the time. I'm never going to be a basketball player. I'm never going to make money. I'm never going to, that's not how this does it. Is this a good relative hobby? Well, I mean, you're obviously out, you're moving around, you're getting your body in functional states, and you're, healthy. So, yes. Now you have a relationship with a woman that makes it so that, you have to spend a lot more time with her and you don't have enough time to go play. And so then you say, well, I can't break this other hobby that's, so healthy for me. So then you end up fucking up this relationship instead of valuing it. And, that's where you've kind of said, okay, well, this hobby is more important than the relative value of this. And for what it's worth, maybe that person's a piece of shit and you don't really like her, so that's fine. But you've got to make those kind of value judgments, and decide whether or not something has relative value when it comes to developing something that is a good hobby or not. And you can say, okay, well, I still need to work out, but now I need to include this woman if that's what I need to, if that's what I'm valuing. So I'm going to make it so that we go running or we go blah, 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 And I guess that kind of almost, runs into, the philosophical, ideals that we're saying with purpose. Oh, this is so disgusting, though, that you type in the word purpose, and this is DuckDuckGo, and Justin Bieber's albums, one of the first thing that comes up, it just makes you want to vomit. Like, that's purpose? Oh, God. Oh, kill us all now. Okay. But, that kind of runs into the idea of purpose is like, what is the purpose of these relative values of, hobbies or, habits that we're forming? Do we, develop the habit of wanting to smoke cigarettes so that when we're around, women that, smoke cigarettes, we have some way to get an in to talk to them, Is that really why you develop that habit? Because maybe it is. And that's, if you analyze yourself, from when you were 13 or something, when you actually maybe, for me, when I smoked cigarettes, and I'll tell you this, I can say when I would go out to clubs and a girl's smoking a cigarette, I'm like, I'll take a hit of her cigarette, and, talk to her for a moment. It's fucking silly, but, so what is the, purpose of all of these things? What's the purpose of all these, habits that we develop? And what's the meaning of actually, developing a hobby that has some kind of reason or, some kind of function? Because we don't really always develop hobbies and habits that, have real purpose. I mean, I got a goddamn fucking, what do you call that stupid thing? What do you call these stupid things here? I want to say liar, but it's not a liar. See, now, if you had developed a habit of, knowing, and I don't, let's see how bad the sound is. Oh, wow, yeah, no, you can hear that very well. So if you had developed the habit of knowing a lot of different chords for piano, then you would have, the ability to play those same chords, within the structure of this, instrument, which I'm amazed that my brain can't, pick up harp. Gosh, it took so long. I kept, cycling harmonica and harmonica and harmonica and lyre, Lyre. But so anyway, if you know the different potential chords that you would do in a piano, then you could play this very, very easily. And likewise, you can, have the purpose, again, this is all very philosophical nonsense talk, but still, you can have the purpose of actually, being able to play with other people in time, in, key with a particular note. And see, that's something that if you don't understand that, this is the C and this is the F, right? Let's see here. F, G, A, B, no, C, E, F. No. This must be the C. And you can see this is a little bit off. I don't play this at all. So, that's good. Nobody knows what they're talking about, though, Zoro. When you're, when you develop something, though, where you actually know, the different notes, you'll be able to, play in time with somebody else. Well, you think so? That's fine. I mean, when you're talking about philosophy, you can't really talk about anything. It's like, well, that's good. Don't listen to it. Anyway, anyway, we're talking about basic philosophies in regards to purpose. You'd see that I don't have a lot of understanding of the actual chord structure that you would do when you're talking about playing in Congress with a bunch of other people. And given that, you can't literally use, I could play in structure with other people with a guitar, but because I can't, translate easily, because this is essentially, if you understand, the ideals of a piano, this is essentially a piano, right? And if you could, if you know how to play and what to do, then you're going to be able to actually play in Congress with someone. Versus, if you want to play and you don't know, particularly what to do, you're literally going to, and I've done this before, you're going to have to, go to, individual notes and wait for them to hit that note, and then you'll play that, and you'll be able to play kind of in Congress, but you're not. You're not. And, I would say that is absolutely true for me when it comes to something like a piano, something like a harp, something like a violin. Fuck, I couldn't play a violin for the life of me. And I have a violin, But, and so, but see, I have all of those habits that I try to develop. I just couldn't develop those higher string instruments. I could a little bit with a guitar. And, but what's the purpose to all those things? Again, so what I made, all of my purpose for all of those things is, to give people and or people I like, things that I've made. Like I've made a series of 50 paintings for my mother. I'll sing songs to this girl that I love, and send it to her. I've written a song. It's not that great, but I've written a song. But so again, you develop these habits. You create hobbies that are actually of some kind of value, and then you have to assign some kind of purpose to them, or else you've just wasted your fucking time all your life. And there is nothing wrong with not making money. There's nothing wrong with not having things. There's nothing wrong with any of those. The real problem is if you don't develop these things into something that actually caused you some level of happiness. Otherwise, you literally have, all of these, habits and all these hobbies that you've literally developed over huge courses of time that lead to nothing. I mean, I have some. I used to play like League of Legends all the time. I have all of these great, skills that are worthless. Well, are they great skills? No, obviously not. But, I built a house too. So, I mean, all of the times that I've been, building and learning how to, construct things, I literally was able to build a house. I can do all of the electrical. I can do all of the, drainage and all of the plumbing. It's not like I'm not capable. So, but I've developed habits that have wasted hours and days and weeks of my life. I mean, who the fuck, is ever going to be like, Sam, you need to go and play this League of Legends fucking, thing and learn how to do this so that we all don't die or so that we can have hot water. That's not how fucking life works. So, at least the habits of, some of the string instruments I've done, I can play something at least individually that's not bad. And so there is some purpose to at least making myself happy, if not others, or and even the practice, gives you some level of happiness, doesn't it? So, it's not like there's just really, there's this fine line where people don't understand the waste that they're doing with their lives. And again, you just need to look at it and you need to say, are the things that I'm doing actually going to develop some kind of level of value? And, I don't know. Let's try to, talk about meaning for a bit. And, really I just put these images up so that this isn't very useful, but so that I'll talk about something, more philosophical over the course of the time. So, let's talk about meaning for a bit. So, what is the meaning of something, when you are trying to develop all of these, different values? Like, what is the meaning of developing anything? Why do we do the things we do? I mean, really. It's a good question. What is the point? Why do you make things work? Why do you make life? Why is it important to you? Why? And I guess so that gets back to, that man with the train who I still don't understand people spending thousands of dollars on trains. But let's just talk about this. We've got the man with the train again. Here he is. He's living his life, right? And he finds meaning in buying these trains and these tracks and adding them to this massive collection and this huge, stupid diorama, when he could be spending that money actually building a real train. Probably, not a huge one, but, he could be doing something of value. Well, see, that's just it. Where's the meaning? Where's the value? If you find meaning in it, is there meaning or is there value in it? I don't know. See, that's just it. You gotta really fight that, ideal that your hobbits and your hobbits. I keep putting hobby and habit together. But yeah, let's call it your hobbits. when you think about your hobbits, You've got to really have relative value idealized, I think, or else you could waste so much money and so much energy on things that nobody will ever care about and nobody will ever be interested in. So, fuck, man, I don't know what to say. Is that guy who finds happiness in buying stupid trains make sense? I just don't know. I can't understand how it could possibly make fucking sense. Yeah. It doesn't to me, really. Like imagine somebody like Jimmy Carter who was building houses for poor people, you know? Could you imagine him being like, "Yeah, here's my $100,000 train set." Could you imagine somebody that actually has any kind of senses, you know, buying a plastic train that has, mechanical things in it for, thousands of dollars when they know how much it costs to, build a house, when they know how much it costs to actually, do something of value for others? Fuck if I know, man. Yeah, fuck if I know, man. That's just it. It's just like, what is relative value and meaning? What is it? What do we assign, our relative value and meaning to when it comes to things like our hobbies? Does somebody who, likes to collect, uh, like action figures as a hobby, does it only get relevant meaning when they decide they can sell the action figures for a lot more several years later or something? Before then, it was just a ridiculously stupid. Okay, but see, hold the phone, right? See, that's just it. Like, let's say somebody buys hundreds and hundreds of action figures over the course of time, right? Now they have those hundreds of action figures. Now, at some point, they're doing fairly well. Let's say they're like now they were 14 when they started, now they're 35. And they're doing fairly well. Um, but they have this opportunity to basically, if they can get together, $20,000, they can make $60,000. Like, and let's say it's a guarantee. Let's not make this, some kind of a, scam or any kind of a betting thing. If they can get that $20,000, they'll be able to have $60,000 in, another year because it's a development or something, blah, 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 that's already sold out. They just need the money to actually start the building. We're just making a situation here. So, after they've done that, gosh, I lose myself because I'm so stupid. that's, that's so common of me. But after they do that, they've got the 20,000, or they want to get 20,000. They see these hundreds or maybe thousands at this point of action figures up on their wall, and they say, "Man, if I only had that $20,000, and then they know that they can sell, this one for 300 and that one for 4 and that one for, and they have to, and it would take some time, a little bit of effort, but they know they could sell it all, and they decide not to, knowing that they were going to, be able to triple their money potentially. That would be, when that hobby became no longer of any kind of relative value, and it, you literally, decided to hold on to something that was so Well, I guess, in your own mind's eye, you could say, oh no, they've gone up in this much in price, so they'll go up more in price, and I'll have even less than that money that I would have had. Ugh. I guess somebody would, be able to make that kind of strange, attempt to make things work in their mind. Yeah, fuck, man. I don't know. I don't know. Like, is there any meaning or any value in fucking the collection of things that you like? People used to collect these stupid fucking tchotchke things. They'd have them. They'd have these, huge, displays of all these little kind of weird, tchotchkes, and it didn't make any sense. Like, what the fuck is the point of collecting all of them? And sure enough, most of them just went into landfills. So, I mean, is there any reason or any value to that? No. It's the same thing as, collecting action figures, and if you had a chance to sell them at a huge markup and you didn't, there would be no purpose. It would literally fail to have a purpose. It, unless you were just rich beyond all, compare, and so it didn't matter. But then wouldn't you just be a horrible gluttonous person that, was actually very evil and selfish by not trying to help others if you were so rich? All of it, see, it kind of spins around where, you kind of realize that there is no relative value in some of those things. Like, and it's true when it comes to the stupid tchotchkes that your grandmother would have collected. All of the weird porcelain things that used to mean something and used to be of value, they don't mean anything. There's not, porcelain can be made in such masses that none of it matters anymore, but these things used to matter and used to have some kind of value to these people. All these little cherubs and shit. But, when you think about, the relative value of it, you're like, what was the hobby of collecting those worth? Like, something to that person only. Same with the spoons. Goddamn spoons. People have fucking, spoons from where they, went. They have a goddamn whole wall of all these different spoons. And you know that their kids or their grandkids, if they ever get them, they're just going to go into a landfill. It's just a horrible thing. But that's because it has no real relative value, no purpose, no meaning. It's just nothing to it. So what's the point in that hobby? And that's where you say, okay, well, I wish my grandma had learned how to, play goddamn cello or something. Because then when we went to, her house for Christmas, we would have heard her play cello. I mean, really. Fuck, Same with, I wish she hadn't, smoked for most of her life. Because then she wouldn't have died at like 68 or something. These relative habits, they kill you. They're not good. And, of course, she was, such an older generation that, smoking was, good for your lungs at that point. So, yeah, I don't know. There's just something interesting to be said about, the development of, different, habits and what they do to your life, and the pointlessness of some hobbies. You literally will play a video game that will never translate in any way to anything of value in real time. And it's good to play video games for they have a relative value for stress relief, but sometimes you think that you're actually developing a skill or something, and you're not really. You're not learning how to put a goddamn outlet in. You're not learning how to paint. You're not learning how to, make a face. You ever try to make a goddamn face on a fucking canvas? It is impossible. It's very difficult anyway. You got to do these old master techniques where you use charcoal first, and then you get in the lines, and then you get in some of the color. God, it fucking takes forever though, and you got to learn it. You got to have these habits and these hobbies that you develop over huge periods of time. And finally, after those huge periods of time, can you finally give them some kind of purpose and meaning where you develop it, and you're like, oh, well, I really love my mother. I'm going to paint a picture of her and, my dead father. And then, you actually can do that. You actually can have something that translates into value. That, and that's, something that you don't get if you're developing the hobby of, collecting action figures, or you're developing the habit of, smoking cigarettes. Maybe if you do chew, you're better at spitting, I guess. Maybe. But is that really going to, are you going to be able to get purpose and meaning out of that in the long run? Maybe not. And hell, I smoke marijuana a lot. Am I developing a purpose and meaning out of that? Do I get enough relative value out of it to justify it? I have some issues with my body internally, so I think I do. But, these are the questions that you got to ask yourself when you're developing, your mind, and you're thinking philosophically about something as simple as hobbits. Again, we're gonna call hobbies and habits hobbits from now on. So when you're developing your hobbits, you got to make sure that you're thinking about whether or not they're going to give you any kind of purpose, value, and meaning in your life. Really, they going to have any relative value to any of the people around you? Are you ever going to be happy about any of the things that you've actually developed? Because if you're not, well, fucking stop doing them. Because, okay, are they giving you relative value and happiness? You got to ask yourself that. Because, like I said, when you're playing a video game, you are relaxed. You're being able to pass some time. Your body's not having to do any heavy lifting or any work that's actually going to harm it more, if you do have any harm to it. So, I mean, is it a bad thing? No. Nothing's a bad thing until, it becomes a perpetual habit. And then, you say, okay, well, this habit is something I need to justify on a secondary ground. So, with that said, I think that, we did a pretty good little, lecture here. Nothing, too sublime or, deep, but, that's not the point of this. We're just supposed to, go through and basically talk about the simple philosophies related to, the building of a habit, what kind of habits and hobbies, make any kind of sense, and because really it's hard to make those things translate into any purpose and meaning. Some people live their lives without any meaning and purpose to any of the things they do. Literally zero. So think about that. Think about whether or not the things that you do are going to give you any actual purpose and meaning. Think about whether or not they're going to develop, into something that, you're going to be able to look at, 10 to 15 years later and be pleased that you were able to do. And I know that's very hard to imagine when you are younger. But, something as simple, there's some really basic ones. Language. When you're younger, you wouldn't even understand it because you're just learning it. But if you learn 2 or 3 languages, I mean, the value that has to your relative life. You're going to be able to do so much more than just the average person. You're going to be able to think in different ways than the average person. Than the average person being the person who only has even one of your many languages, not necessarily English or the Spanish or, Yugoslavian or whatever the fuck it is. You're going to have different thought processes because of it. And maybe not if they're all the same, like Romance languages, like Spanish and French maybe have some of the same thought processes, but there's definitely going to be some different, feels and different ideals. So, yeah, it's hard maybe when you're young to understand how important it is, but, develop these hobbies and these habits that are actually going to, running maybe is not the best because it has such high tension, but if you're healthy and you can keep all of your tendons in good order, maybe running is a good one. I don't know. Working out in general, doing some kind of basic workout that you do consistently, that's one of those really great hobbies to develop, or habits, I suppose. It's kind of a hobby too. Working out is a hobby. See, that's just it. Anything that's a good habit, becomes a good hobby. Yeah, or it becomes a hobby, in general. And then, the more habitually you do it, the better you become. You really do. And it's hard to understand that, but it's not really when you can see your development over time. It's when you're young and you don't understand that time exists almost, that, there's no reason to see any kind of development over time. You can't see yourself like literally painting a picture and, seeing, it's amazing if you start painting and then 10 years from there and you see your paintings, you'll be amazed at how much better you are. And, you'll be amazed at how you can finally understand the lines that you need to do and the color schemes and the color shadings that you need to do. And, I'm sure that, I didn't quite, I played guitar quite a lot. I mean, I can play quite a lot. But, I'd have to practice more to get myself back into it. So, I can't really claim the same thing for my guitar playing, though it's very, very good. It may be even better than my painting. And, same with singing. Good God, is it hard to learn to sing? If you want to learn to sing, you've got to start developing a habit of just, kind of singing to yourself and learning it and developing your voice. And you still may never have a voice because you just may not have the proper, makeup, the proper body structure for, singing, at least in the way that you might want to. But, all of these things are just habits that you develop that you will find purpose and meaning for later. So, anyway, I think that that's pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with, that. We'll talk here. This is nothing too exciting. Basically, develop hobbits and habbies. Hobbits and habbies. Hobbits and habbies. Fuck, man. When you say the same words over and over again, like habit and hobby, it is impossible not to say them wrong. It's just fucking possible. So, when you develop habits and hobbies, make sure that they are something that has a relative value to other people. Make sure that there's some meaning. Make sure that there is, a purpose to the things you're doing. I know it all sounds very kind of trite and meaningless, but really, I've tried to, over the course of this hour, define why it's not so trite and meaningless to try to have these things, all line up in the exact way I just said. Literally have the things you do have relative value to others. And when you see how little relative value things have to others, that's when you realize maybe that this habit is not of value at all. Again, we can relate the heavy drug use of something like heroin and the habits of, that develop. It's hard to say. Something like cocaine is probably the same thing, and it's maybe got to do with the fact that, when you develop that habit, it has so much money, or money that's being lost in relation to it. So, I don't know. It's a very weird thing to say whether or not, it's probably the exact same problem as, heroin. You're just developing a habit that doesn't have enough relative value to others versus the money that you could give them if you weren't buying the cocaine. Again, something I've never done, but, because it's too goddamn expensive. Who the fuck would, do a drug that's so expensive? It makes no sense, especially when you've got things like LSD out there. That's not expensive in comparison. So, do things that have relative value to you. Do things that, will hopefully that later in your life you can apply some kind of purpose to and meaning to, and maybe they'll make, the important things in your life actually come true or happen in a real way. I in college I did a bunch of courses in, writing. And I wrote a book that, I haven't, released or anything, but it's nice to actually write a book and feel like, you can write something that's 400 pages long that is cohesive, that, you can actually reread, and you're not like, oh, well, I probably need to go and reread it and then do a shitload of editing, but, fuck it. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. So, you do the things that, see, that didn't have enough purpose and meaning for me to actually pursue it, but it's a good thing that, I at least have the, habits of good writing from, previous moments in my life, so that at least I can do that and have, a good time with it. And again, it's nice to get to that final stage where you actually apply purpose and meaning. And I can apply at least the purpose of saying I wanted to write those things so that I had them out, and then I can, not have to think about them so much within my own mind's eye, at least. So, with that being said, I think that's about all I got to say on the subject. Not really much else to be said. If you can't, get to that point where you can apply any purpose and meaning to your habits and your hobbies, hopefully they at least make you happy. Hopefully. And that's going back to the heroin thing, hopefully those heroin addicts that are doing that heroin and they're fucking all strung out, hopefully they're at least happy. Hopefully. And hopefully, before they die and that dose that's overdoses them, kills them, hopefully they're in some huge state of bliss, hopefully. Because otherwise, what's the relative value to them? Probably goddamn nothing. Because it's obviously nothing to all of us. So, I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody who's had a friend that overdosed, they are so fucking distraught over the worst goddamn thing. So, make sure that you're the hobbits, the hobbies and the habits that you develop actually have some relative value to others, or else, God, I really hope they have a relative value to you, or else, fuck you, just a waste of time on all levels. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night, and, well, this is Samuel Mittler signing out.